employment, terms and conditions of employment, and evaluation of performance are permitted topics in executive sessions. Because matters often occur between advertised meetings, Pennsylvania law allows for executive sessions to occur between meetings, provided they are properly announced at a subsequent meeting. To address personnel matters that arose between scheduled public meetings, Borough Council held executive sessions to discuss matters involving employment, terms and conditions of employment, and other related personnel matters on September 28th, 2020 and October 14th, 2020. No votes were taken at those meetings. Council provided direction to its legal counsel, and following discussions with the former manager, an agreement was approved by the former manager. This agreement will be voted on tonight in a public meeting required by this Borough Code. Borough Council will accept public comment as required by the Sunshine Act prior to acting on the agreement. The motion will be to approve the agreement retroactive to the former manager's last day performing his duties. In addition, there will be a motion, again following public comment, to approve the temporary employment of Mr. Frank Lynch as interim borough manager, retroactive to October 21st, 2020. Mr. Lynch is a longtime elected official who has previously served in this capacity, and council has confidence that he is the right fit for the borough at this time. It is important to note that the General Assembly provided the borough with great latitude to determine the manner in which it identifies an appropriate candidate to fill the borough manager position that's currently vacant. Council has not yet decided on the exact process it will employ to conduct the search for a new borough manager. As to the former manager and the agreement between the manager and the borough has already publicly thanked Mr. Dennis for his prior service and made clear that his decision to resign had nothing to do with any disciplinary action. Every employee, including public employees, have a right to a level of privacy regarding their employment, and it is the hope of council that people will respect Mr. Dennis's decision and his prior work for the constituents of the borough. Finally, I remind everyone that public comment is just that, public comment. Council is in a position to receive comments, but is not required to respond to either questions or demands. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Right. Having said that, I'm hearing a buzzing sound, sorry. I am going to open up for public comments. So if you have a public, if you'd like to make a comment, please put your cursor over the participants at the bottom of your screen, find your name and raise your hand, and Julie will unmute you.
Bonnie, it sounds like you're flying a toy airplane.
Me?
I think
you
it's
can mute yourself, Bonnie. Yeah.
Yeah, it's coming from your thing for some reason.
That's weird. Oh.
Except now we can't hear her. Julie, do we have any hands raised?
I do not see any hands.
All right, we'll wait another couple seconds. There is a time at the end of our agenda when we'll have a second public comments if anyone wants to make a comment then.
Still none.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, before we get to the budget, we have a few motions that we need to hear, and I'm going to turn it over to Alyssa to begin with accepting the resignation and separation agreement of Sam Robbins.
Thank you. I'm working on unmuting myself here. So I would like to begin with a motion to accept the resignation of Borough Public Works Director Sam Robbins from his employment as Director of the Public Works for Camp Hill Borough.
Have a second. Thank you. Any discussion? All right, then I'll call the question. All those in favor of accepting the resignation and separation agreement with Sam Robbins, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Okay, thank you. So next I would like to move to accept the sorry. Get to my next one. Next, I would like to move to approve the severance agreement and release between Public Works Director Sam Robbins and Camp Hill Borough.
Isn't that what we just did?
Just did Sam Robbins.
We just did Sam Robbins.
Yeah, we're on Pat.
Yeah, Pat.
That was to accept the resignation This is
Oh, wait,
to approve the severance agreement and release between Public Works Director. So we just voted and approved the resignation.
Okay.
So now we're approving. So I move, that was a motion to approve the severance agreement and release between Public Works Director Sam Robbins and Camp Hill Borough.
All right, a second. Do we have a second? Thank you.
Second.
All right, any questions about the separation agreement with Sam Robbins? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of approving the separation agreement with Sam Robbins, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carries.
Thank you. And the next motion then is to accept the resignation of Borough Manager Patrick Dennis from his employment as Borough Manager of Camp Hill Borough.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? All those in favor of accepting the resignation of Pat Dennis as Camp Hill Borough Manager, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And the last motion that I would like to bring to council is a motion to approve the severance agreement and release between Borough Manager Patrick Dennis and Camp Hill Borough.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? All those in favor of approving the separation agreement with Pat Dennis, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Aaron, did you vote? Oh, Aaron's frozen. Okay. All those opposed, please say aye, or excuse me, all those, any opposed? Thank you. Lee Stinnett, I don't know what the rules are, but I think Erin's frozen, so I'm not sure how she voted.
I don't know that there's a rule for that. This is a new COVID problem.
She'll
Okay.
she'll rejoin in a second.
Okay, good. All right, we'll just, okay, let's see. I'm gonna admit her. Here she comes.
Erin, did you vote?
Unmute, unmute. yourself. Unmute. Can you unmute? There you go. Oh, there.
I apologize. I lost connection. I'm back. Where are we?
We just had a vote for, to approve the separation agreement with Pat Dennis. And I'm sorry to put you on
I
the spot.
voted
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Now we have Frank Lynch.
Oh, and I just closed my document. Hold on one second. I
Oh my
forgot I had one more here. Okay,
Actually, I have two more.
two more. Okay. All right. So I would like to move to authorize the appointment of Frank Lynch as the interim borough manager of Camp Hill Borough effective October 21st, 2020.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
I would just like to say I feel really fortunate that we were able to find an interim borough manager so qualified to come in and help us get through this period of time while we search for an appropriate replacement for Pat. So thank you, Frank.
I agree with you, and having Frank here allows us to take our time and do a really good search for a new manager.
Welcome aboard, Frank.
Oh, we haven't voted him in yet. All right, so we have a motion on the table. Any more discussion? All right, all those in favor of appointing Frank Lynch as our interim borough manager, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, Frank, now you're welcome aboard.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome my favorite cousin in the whole wide world, Kathy Benton. I see her name here. I don't see her face. So
I'm
she's-
here.
There she
Congratulations,
is.
cuz.
Oh, I didn't realize it was your
Guy.
Have fun.
Yep.
Okay, well, now we get to give you a really fun job. So I would like to move to appoint interim borough manager Frank Lynch as right to know officer for Camp Hill Borough.
Second.
Second.
All right. Any discussion except Frank can't say anything?
Does he want to? Does he want-
No and no.
All right,
Okay.
all those in favor of having Frank Lynch as our right to know officer, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, Frank, you're in.
And just for those who don't know, Pat, for any of the public who might not be aware, Pat did serve in this, our former borough manager did serve as our right to know officer.
That's correct. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Zach to bring up our draft budget, which I think we've done a nice job with, thanks to Zach so far, and hopefully we'll be able to wrap things up this evening.
Okay, thank you. Can everybody see the Excel file?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, all right, so we had a budget meeting on the 21st of October. And at that meeting, we did kind of an overview of all the different funds and the different tabs. Finance committee, really since kind of August, has had a lot of meetings about the budget this year. There's a lot of things we're working on. So tonight's meeting is supposed to be the last budget meeting. And then what we would do, and Frank or Lee, correct me if I'm wrong, we would then advertise it at the November meeting, which is next week. And then we would approve it, at the December meeting, or that's the tentative timeline at the moment. And so since, we kind of had this shakeup with staffing, what we did at the 21st meeting was we gathered up, kind of the final questions that council had. We don't have answers for all of them. There wasn't too many questions. We don't have answers for all of them because we don't kind of have some of the internal knowledge and we're still working through them. But what the plan for tonight was to go through the answers to those questions to see if I think there might be one or two additional questions that have come up since then. And then to kind of like seal this up so that we can move on to next week's meeting. All right.
Okay.
So I'm going to minimize your screen. Okay. So the first question we had was, had there been a discussion about budgeting $20,000 for a park safety patrol? So I think this got kicked around with Pat and maybe Aaron and some people. And what we did was we had a public safety meeting the following day that happened to be scheduled. And in that meeting, we talked about the park safety patrol and if we need that, if we think we need it. And the plan is for now, for this budget, we're not going to put in $20,000 for that. It was not included in the current draft of the budget. We weren't going to include it. And, that's something that as Schaefer kind of matures into next year, we can reevaluate that if it's something that we think we need. So any questions about that one? Okay. Second question that came up was that in the police department budget, the capital outlay item was increased from $30,000 in previous years to $52,500. And so that was done for 3 different leases that the police department has. But what we determined was those are actually budgeted for and have been budgeted for in our capital improvement fund. So I'm going there real quickly. So under police and capital improvements, we have body cameras, in-car cameras, and the traffic recorder. And the license plate reader, which have been budgeted for. There's a few years left on those lease payments. So we're going to leave that in the capital improvement budget and we've removed it from the operating budget. And we talked about that with Chief Margison and he signed off on it. And we made sure, we didn't want to shortchange him if we were missing something, but I think we're all set there.
Good.
Any questions about that one? Okay. Then item 3, we talked about the change in the part-time codes officer line item. That number was going up to $40,000 in this year's budget. And so, we met with Chris and talked about that. And, we did confirm that was going to be part of the budget. And then, we think that And Chris thinks that that will help us, better serve the community since we have a lot going on. So that one is confirmed as well. Everybody good there? Okay. Item 4 was, where's the $30,000 for the fence replacement at one of the sewer pump stations? We talked about this a few times in the past 12 months. And, Sam had really thought that, and the Public Works Department thought we needed to kind of fix this pump station. And so the answer, we believe, and we're still double checking on this, was that in the sewer fund line items, that there is a $50,000 allocation for equipment, and we think that that was included in there. And we don't have bids for that yet. It might not really be 30,000, but that's what was part of the budget. Questions? Okay, item 5. This one we do not have an answer for, but the question was, in the liquid fuels budget, could we use any of our liquid fuels money for specific portions of the streetscape project? And as I said, we don't know the answer to that yet. So if the answer is yes, and we decide that, that's going to be somehow, part of funding the streetscape plan, we can deal with it at that time. But for now, I don't think there's anything to do there. And then the last 3 were just how we're going to balance the budget. So before we do that, why don't we go to the general government tab. So there was 2 questions about this line item for salaries. So Carl, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Zach. And thanks again for doing such a fantastic job with this. I don't know how we would have gotten through this otherwise. So I think everyone's aware, Mary Beth Brath was the downtown coordinator. She resigned recently. We were allocating $30,000 per year for paying her as a part-time contractor, I think contractor rather than employee. But anyway, she's left. We think that it does make sense to fund that position. We are talking to the Downtown Association, and we still have to work out details on where that position would report. We also don't see this as a long-term annual recurring cost, but it is a small organization that with a lot of individual small business owners who don't have a lot of extra time to devote to this important task of improving the Market Street corridor. So we would like to have the 30,000 in the budget for that position, whatever form it takes. And we couldn't figure out, or Zach and Frank weren't sure whether that salary line had the 30,000 in there or if it was somewhere else. So it's possible it's already in this budget, but if not, I would like to make sure that we do include that. Is that what you needed, Zach? Any other questions?
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
I vaguely remember from previous years that it was under the business committee.
Yeah, we used to do it under the CIP
Right.
budget. It was in the CIP budget under business community relations.
Yeah,
I kind of remember that. So the first year, or maybe it was just the first year I was on council, that it was also in the CIP budget.
Yeah.
I do think that last year, Pat, because we had made that a permanent position, I want to say that the first year it was actually $15,000, and then it went up to 30. Does that sound right?
yeah, because we only had it for like half the year.
Right.
The first time.
And I think that I do think that Pat had moved it from the CIP into the operating budget at that point.
Okay.
So
I'm glad we
I
have
do-
it in.
Go ahead,
Sorry,
Rich.
Zach, yeah. Nick, go ahead. I'll ask after.
I was going to say, if we are going to do this, and if it is meant to be kind of a 1 or 2 time event, it may make sense to move it back to the capital improvement budget. I mean, it's a salary, so it's a little strange, but it'll be a little bit easier to keep an eye on it and to remember that this was meant to be kind of a 1 time, and then maybe it phases out type of thing. If we put it in the just in the salary line item, kind of just like we're talking about now, it's hard to tell what's in that line item when you just look at the budget without Pat here. So I don't know what people's thoughts are on that. One, if we're going to include it, and then two, where do we want to put it? Do we want to put it just in the salary line, or do we want to put it in the CIP?
Well, one, I think should include it. I think it's a great thing. I think she did a great job, and I think we need the position. My concern is, I'm not sure it's in the general government fund because the request is so much lower than last year to begin with. Like, we approved $382,000 for this year. The request for this year is only $368,000. So under salaries for the general government, that's what made me nervous.
Well,
Has to do with the restructure. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lee.
yeah.
I just want to
right.
make sure it's in there.
It's when we restructure the staff, the salary for the public works director is somewhat lower since the assistant manager position is not included under his responsibility.
I like the suggestion of putting it back in the capital budget, and if it turns out there's something somewhere else, then we're 30,000 to the good. So,
Yeah.
and just to clarify on the timing, that's an ongoing discussion. We're not saying, we certainly don't see it as a permanent role, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, whatever. That's something that we're still looking at.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I do.
Okay. That sounds good to me.
So we're going to keep
Okay.
the
I have
salaries.
a question. May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Ray.
On page 8, 463, DCHA contribution. Do you know what that is?
Which
It's
department
the
is
last page.
paid?
It's the last page on the general fund. I believe that's for where we put Mary Beth's salary in.
Hey, there you go.
That DCHA contribution.
Ah,
Was the borough contributing, paying bills for the downtown association?
mhm.
Now, since the downtown association is a legal entity now, because they did get their, they are now a 401, a 501. They're on their own, but we were just going to pay for the salary of Mary Beth in that line item.
Ray, thanks. That's great. And I mean, I'm not aware of any other contribution we make to DCHA unless I'm not remembering something. So that would explain it.
Yeah, but in the last year, we had some money in for the downtown business for paying bills for them until they got themselves together.
Right.
And then we also put her salary in this item, this line item here, for Mary Beth. And when we had it in the capital improvement fund, that money was, what we spent there was money that the businesses were contributing. And we put that money into the checking account, which was called the Downtown Business Association. Since we don't have that account anymore, I have $15 in that account that I'm closed out and I'm sending them a check. So there'll be no line item on that. And then Mary Beth was going to be for Pat in that line item that we have highlighted right now.
All right. Mystery
What?
solved.
Yeah, that's helpful knowledge. Glad you're here, Ray.
Okay.
So we'll change that.
I'll say
So
that-
do we want to change that to 30 then?
Yes.
It sounds like I'm hearing Carl.
Sure.
No, that's fine.
And she was paid hourly, right? So it's more,
That is correct.
it's an hourly position, really, not salary.
When I was eyeballing the 10-1 paid to date, maybe that's why that's kind of under what you'd think it would be if it was an
Yeah.
hour.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
That
Thank
sounds
you.
good. All right, and then back to the same tab. under salaries. Rich, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
No, I think it was answered.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, then we're also talking about, again, because we weren't sure about all the salary, what's exactly in that line item. But before we had awarded some bonuses in the past.
Right.
And my question was, is that in here? And are we doing that again this year? And kind of what's the thought process on that? I don't know if PPP had discussed any of that or.
Because I know in the past, I know PPP and Pat had discretion for bonus up to $15,000 a year. And my concern was, do we consider keeping this year just for people who came in, the extra work they had to do for COVID this year?
Well, and even more so
Or
now,
not.
running this kind of had this big shuffle with Sam and Pat, and
Are they working more? Are they taking on more responsibilities now? Is it worthwhile to add the bonus in for the staff or not?
Well, I mean, Alyssa can call a PPP meeting and we can,
I'll call a PPP meeting and we can discuss that. We had discussed raises to some degree, but you know, my experience is that typically it's bonuses are something that are a solution when raises aren't an option, right? That bonuses come into play when the budget, when the finances don't allow for a raise to base. But we will discuss that as the committee.
I'm not sure. We just had to get out of that habit. I'm okay how we decide to go forward. It's just how we're going to have the discussion for PPP since we have to finish the budget today to advertise it next week for us to come back and it's just going to show up next week. How do we get to discuss it then? If we agree or disagree with whatever PPP comes up with versus just finishing while we're sitting here. I mean, it's supposed to be done before our last budget meeting so we can all discuss the salaries and if we decide to do bonuses or not. How do we make it a public discussion if we decide to go forward?
So
We just adjust it next week?
Well, we could potentially approve the budget for advertising subject to, with a placeholder for amendment after PPP has the meeting. I assume a minor change like that can be done. Lee, I don't know, please stand it, if you can comment on that.
Technically, the budget has to be hung for 10 days prior to official adoption. So we do have a little time, come back next month, figure it out, and then it gets advertised pursuant to the borough code.
okay.
Well, I mean, I can't tell if that sounds complicated or not. I mean, another option would be is since we're still working through exactly what's in this budgeted number.
Yeah.
Because if we don't need all that money that's there, it's going to come back to us. It's not going to disappear. But I mean, we can put the same number that we had used in previous years for bonuses in the line item now. And then as we go through the process, it'll be budgeted for. And if we don't do it, or if it comes in less, then it'll just come back to us next year.
I don't know that we've used that in previous years though.
Well, we did 2 years ago, I know.
Okay.
We awarded,
And
yeah.
I don't know if that number right there includes a 3% increase to base.
Well, that's the problem I'm talking about. We still don't know the answer to that.
I wonder if Ray could help with that since he does payroll and we could just add it all up and put 3% on and see what number we get.
Okay. I can help you there. If you put your cursor on the number on the 21 request, 36, 336, yeah.
Yeah, there's a bunch of hard codes in there.
You see the count? Yes. Well, those are for the salaries that we are making now. In other words, 100,000 is for the borough manager. I'm not sure this. I had that.
7749.
Those. What the hell is that?
I'm going to point at the screen. I'm not trying to hit you with my pen.
That 70,000. Oh, I think that's mine. Sorry. That would be Bill Albright. No, the
So is,
40,300 is Bill. The 42 is Rachel. That's what we're making now. I'm assuming the 75,000 would be for the assistant manager,
well, the Public Works Director.
the public works director. That was him. And then maybe that 20,000, I don't know what the 20,000 is. Maybe that's what you were talking about earlier.
My guess is that 20,000, let's figure out if that 20,000 is 3% of 348,000.
Yeah,
So,
I would think that would be the 3% on all three. Or,
That's only
Yeah,
10,500.
okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what
yeah, so
that.
so maybe there is, that's, 10,444, maybe there is some money budgeted in there for bonus, but it's good to know that there is at least already in there 3% across the board, 3%.
Those wages that are in there, I'm sorry. Those
We're
wages
missing,
that-
we're missing a salary though. There's 7 staff and there are 6 numbers there. I'm thinking, is Audrey's salary under Parks and Rec? It's not there. or-
Yes.
Okay.
I would be listed.
Mike.
Yeah, and I would be listed under the other.
Yeah, Chris is listed under
Yeah,
zoning,
Chris is there,
Audrey's under recreation.
right?
Can we look at Audrey and Chris and see if theirs includes
Yeah, those are 3%.
okay, so I just wanted to make sure. Okay, so there is some it looks like there is about $10,000 there budgeted right now for potentially for bonuses.
Additional comp.
Okay, good.
So I'll call a PPP meeting and we can discuss that.
Those wages that I showed you for each individual, that's what we have now.
Okay,
That does not, those wages don't include any increases. So
okay.
that's why I thought the 20,000 might be for some of it.
So I
Yeah.
think 10,444 would be 3% across the 3%
Okay.
across the board. So it looks like there is the 3% across the board for all of those salaries plus a little bit extra.
Correct, yes.
Okay, so we can advertise this number for the budget and we'll be
Yeah.
safe. Okay, good.
I have a question. What timeline do we have to advertise the budget before we act on it? How long do
You
we
have to,
advertise it?
you have to
Typically,
begin, go ahead.
sorry.
You have to begin preparing the budget at least 30 days prior to the adoption. Then you have to put an ad in the newspaper and have it available for public inspection for at least 10 days prior to action.
Okay, well, that does not equal next week if we act on it next week. Is that correct?
No, historically, we advertise it in November, Aaron, and we approve it in December.
Right, but that doesn't add up in my timeline. Is that,
No, the 10 days would start after we vote to advertise. It would hang in Borough Hall.
okay?
So we
and
actually give
we're
people
both
30 days
advertised
more intense.
next week.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's a vote to advertise. That's the best way to
Thank
think
you.
of it.
Yep, okay. Was there any other questions?
Mm-mm.
Not that I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay, final answer. So as Aaron said, as we said a couple times, but Aaron just reiterated, so we'll, next week we'll vote to advertise it. Frank, I think you were gonna kind of, for the public, do a short PowerPoint, just the high level items. Is that right? For next week?
Yep. Based on what we finish up with here tonight.
Yep. And so, going forward, we definitely are going to need to make some changes on quarterly budget to actual numbers that get reported back to the borough so that we can all kind of focus more on this rather than just talking about this at budget time every year. Okay. So, finance committee is going to work on a couple of those items. But so I just want to say these numbers out loud. So, sorry, did somebody say something? say these numbers out loud here so we can all hear them. But so right now, we're going to need to use about 598,000. That number might change a tiny bit between now and next week, but Frank will figure that out. But use about $598,000 of the general fund balance to balance the budget on paper. Okay. Now, hopefully, the revenue projections that are down come in better than expected. If we don't have to have as much money spent on litigations and right to know requests and all those types of things, we can have a much better year than that. But at the moment, that's what we are going to need to do. And excuse me for 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. I couldn't figure out how to mute it real quick since I'm sharing my screen. Okay, so then the second one that we want to make sure we say out loud here is, so for the sewer fund, we're going to use approximately $329,000 of sewer fund balance to balance the budget. All right. And, when you look at the sewer fund, and we tried to take a good look at this last year, and I think finance will dig into this again this year. But, Hampton Township is requiring that we budget $350,000 annually to do collection system improvements. That's a reasonably large number for a system our size, or at least that's what we've heard, in the past. So, because of that, coupled with the fact that we pay them $1.6 million at a minimum each year, and then we have some debt, that's why that system right now runs at a deficit, and we've talked about needing to address that sometime in the future, because in about 6 to 8 years we're going to have to make some type of rate adjustment or expense cuts or something in order to keep that system moving forward. Okay, so we need to keep an eye on that, and we need to talk about that more as we go. And then the last one is for the liquid fuels budget this year, we're going to use fund balance of about $56,000. And the reason that we're doing that is lower than expected revenues is what we're budgeting for next year for the liquid fuels fund because of COVID-19. And also we have an increase in crosswalk painting, that was a request that came out of public safety. So between the two of those, we're going to need to use some reserves. But again, those are liquid fuel reserves. They're not general fund. They're not sewer. It's a separate fund in order to balance the liquid fuels budget. Okay. So I think it's important to know that those are the three things, that we're using those numbers to balance this budget, but that's on paper, and, we need to strive to do better than that. And, we're going to need to make some changes, here going forward.
Zach, is your thought that if we do quarterly reviews or semi-annual, what did you suggest?
I think let's start. I think we talked about doing quarterly. Let's start with that. And
it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we'll go from there.
Okay.
Zach, do you know what our fund balance is in liquid fuels?
Well, it's in the packet that Ray gives us every month. It is in there. I think we looked a couple weeks ago. I want to say it's around $500,000.
Yeah, it's 500,000 or so.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Great.
So I think that's it. Any other questions? So if we're all okay, let's move this forward to next week's meeting and we can vote to advertise it.
And we'll post, once we vote to advertise, we'll post on the website. Before we just had a copy in Borough Hall, I assume, since we're not doing, we just post it for everyone.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I don't think there's any reason not to.
Yeah, we can do both. We can put a copy in the Borough Hall too.
Yeah.
Zach,
We usually put one in the library and stuff like that too.
Zach, we had talked about the tree budget that's tucked in Parks and Rec.
You're right.
It was cut for reasons I don't know, from 35 to 15, and already as of the end of September, it's we've spent over 15. We're at 17, almost 18,000. And according to both Audrey and Mike, we're going to surpass that. And their experience is that it comes closer to the 35, maybe not quite to the 35, but certainly more than 15 a year.
I thought we cut that because we did a lot of maintenance this year, so that next year we would have less maintenance. We did a lot of cutting. Does anybody recall that?
Well, Aaron, yeah, you're right. And so we had talked about this one in some of our finance meetings we had, and Pat, thought that it was. We looked backwards, and we had about 15,000 budgeted every year for the last couple of years, as far as we could tell. Pat thought that we could lower it this year, especially given that the on-paper deficit, was not looking great with COVID and the legal fees. But it sounds like we're hearing from Public Works without Pat and without Sam that maybe they don't necessarily agree with that, and that we should keep the budget north of 15,000. So that's kind of how we got here and where we are now. Is that right, Frank?
Yeah, that's basically it. And Audrey could probably definitely could speak more deeply about it than I. But yeah, Mike and she were both very firm in saying that we need to make it more than 15.
Okay, so do we want to go back to 30,000?
Well, it wasn't 35. What do you think, Audrey? Would 30 do it? I mean, my guess is getting into heavy tree cutting season too.
Right. Right now, we're doing a lot of trees, and Mike's bidding out other trees that you may see in Seabrook Park that have white X's on them right now. Pat Bauman has been through our parks and has told Mike which trees are dead. I mean, it's not like they're just picking trees out of nowhere. They're actually looking at what trees could be harmful. So Mike's not comfortable with the 15,000 for next year because we've already surpassed that for this year. And we have a lot of ash tree, especially in Seabrook Park. I'm sure if you walk around, I'm sure you've seen them. So there is concern for that number.
What, do you have a suggestion? Should it go back to 35, or would 25 be sufficient, or 30?
Mike said 35. So that's what he told Frank and I, that he would have that at 35. He wouldn't have it at 15. I mean, if you say 30, then we just cut less than.
But I mean, I guess my question would be, yeah, that we're cutting trees that are really kind of things that really need to come down, and not just because we're not mowing grass anymore or anything. But you just said that we are certainly cutting down ones that need to come down.
Well, Public Works isn't cutting the trees. It's actually being done by a tree service.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about how expensive it is to maintain trees, I don't think that 35,000 actually gets you all that far. It doesn't seem like an absurd number. And we don't want trees in the parks that are dead and potentially dangerous to residents. So if they're recommending, based on the number of trees that are dead or have limbs that need to be removed, that it needs to be budgeted for 35, I think we should try and budget for 35.
It'd also be good once we get back up to full staffing, if they Pat Bowman Tree Commission, since we have a shade tree commission with more members, to go through and have a 3-year, 5-year plan, how many are in there, take a survey. If it's going to be 200,000 over 5 years or so forth. But I'm okay with 35,000 for this year.
Yeah, and I would like to hear also where we are with the Shade Tree Commission work, because one of the things that when they were reactivated recently with some new appointees, one of the things that was discussed was taking some of the trees that were planted in Willow that are way too close to one another. As they mature, they'll be way too close to one another as mature trees, and moving them to some of the parks. So, I'd love to hear an update on that as a way to kind of replace some of the trees that are being, that are maybe dead in the parks and being removed.
Something else to remember, I'm not sure if you all know it or not, but the Don Edwards Foundation back in 2019 gave the borough $2,500 to be used towards the purchasing of new trees for the borough, where there may be a tree that needs replaced or a shade tree. So that money is somewhere in the general fund to be used towards trees.
That was a one-time grant, Audrey?
Right, they gave $2,500 and said that it can be used towards the purchasing of trees.
Which foundation did you say?
The
that was?
Don Edwards Jr. Foundation. It was a foundation that was made for Don Edwards Jr. was on council.
And he built our snack shack too, didn't he?
Well, the borough built the snack shack. It was just named after him because he was the one who spearheaded it in the beginning.
Okay.
So
But if I
Borough-
hear for the budget, I hear we're okay with the $35,000 making that change. Seems like there's a consensus for that number.
Yeah, Zach's put it in.
Yep, I changed it.
Great.
Okay. Anything else? So Frank,
So
you're
that'll
posting-
adjust the number you had for how much we're borrowing out of reserves. You'll have to adjust that number.
Yeah. So Frank, I'll send you this file and then
Okay.
you can kind of finalize it. And then in those slides next week, I just want to make sure we have those numbers in there again, whatever the new final numbers are.
Hey,
Gotcha.
Zach. Oh,
It-
sorry to interrupt. There is one other thing, and that is in the capital budget, the paving. I thought we had talked about deferring that for a year, given the large figure for this year, but it's still there.
Well, yeah, good point. Okay.
Maybe I'm not remembering that.
Well,
Nope, you're right.
no, yeah, you're right. So okay, that's a real good point. So we had talked about the fund balance policy. So the plan for the fund balance policy is the following. We were going to have a draft of that available for council next week at the meeting, and then we were going to discuss it again. And then, we could potentially pass it, at the December meeting or even the January meeting if it falls back a month. Because we would like to see how we finish 2020 in the general fund and the sewer fund to help determine, what's a good level to fund that reserve fund. So the closer we get to the end of the year, it'll be a little easier to figure that out. And so we talked about probably the easiest and quickest way to make a meaningful deposit in that was if we took a 1 year off of paving, and that would have about a $600,000 impact from paving and then a $75,000 impact from the ADA ramps. We wouldn't be doing those. So that would, one-time contribution of 675 from basically from the CIP budget. So yeah, I guess you're right, Carl. We need to maybe decide that now if everyone's okay with that, so that we can zero that out in the budget, as we head into next week.
I think one consideration, and I don't know if anybody's talked to Public Works about this, is are there any streets that are, really bad shape that really need to be done next year? We put in those amounts regularly, just to keep the streets in good shape overall. So I think there are two questions. One, are there any streets that are in particularly bad shape that we really don't want to defer? And another question is, can we just leave it in here for now? If we do some further inquiry and decide we don't need to do it next year, then fine, then we're that much to the good. I know the other question I wanted to mention that I think is relevant is putting aside any streets in dire need of repaving. Are we still comfortable that this paving schedule is the right one, to keep the streets in good shape if we do this on a recurring basis? I guess it doesn't necessarily impact next year's budget. If we say, well, we need more, we need less, that's fine because we're on a 30-year paving cycle or something like that. But anyway, I think maybe we leave it in and get answers to those questions. And if we're not going to spend it, we don't spend it.
When we were talking about this in our finance meetings, Carl, we did ask the question about the streets, and the answer we were given at least twice was that there's no street in the borough that couldn't wait an additional year to be paved.
Okay, good.
My question is, do we already have a contract scheduled for next year with someone or signed with someone? Or is that something we move forward with from this point?
Well,
No, we
that's
usually
great.
send it out to bid in April
Yeah, we don't.
Of
we just
next
finished.
year?
next
Yeah.
year.
I would love to hear, I would love to take time to hire a new borough manager and a new public works director and hear some new perspectives on how to approach paving.
Agreed.
I think we should take the money out for next year and put it in that reserve fund that we discussed before.
I do too.
Or maybe not every penny of it, just in case. I mean, is
Well, I
there,
think
Well,
that there's,
it's going into a reserve fund. It can come back out if we have to have it, but.
well, and we know that there's liquid fuels that can help with road repair in the case, right? We know that is one thing that liquid fuels can be
Yes.
used for.
Yep.
Right. I do think it's important for the borough to fund a separate reserve. Given
What?
how busy we are, how many projects we have, how many things we have going on for, what is a tiny borough. I think it's wise if we do fund this reserve.
Well, and we do have 500,000 sitting in liquid fuels right now.
right.
And we do budget $50,000 for repairs on the liquid fuels per year, right? For patching and cracks and so forth.
Correct.
Another consideration is that we're launching the stormwater utility program. And, if that's going to take care of and streets by far are the biggest carriers of water, and all the corrugated piping underneath the streets are going to need replaced in many places. So, in other municipalities, Susquehanna Township, we deliberately held off on a street paving program just for this purpose. And we'll still be using liquid fuels in combination with the stormwater fee, but we'll offload some of it from general fund revenue because it's directly tied to stormwater conveyance. So you don't want to be paving a street and then say, oh, wow, look at that corrugated pipe that really needs replaced. So you really do need some professionals to apply some science so that you don't pave something just to rip it up soon thereafter.
Yeah, agreed.
Richard, I thought we did have a line item in here for the road repairs, but I don't actually see it.
Yeah, it was under the liquid. You have the liquid fuels in front of us?
Yeah,
Let me look it up.
we got snow removal, street signs.
Go ahead.
It's actually where it says highway materials. That's where we put any repairs that we're using. Because what's used is the blacktop and so forth for potholes. It's patch. It's cold patch or something.
Mhm.
That's what we put in the highway materials. That's a catch-all.
Okay.
So if you
So-
want to do repairs or paving with that, we could put it in that line item.
Okay,
Well, it looks like,
the small bit in there.
yeah, in 18 and 19, we had 17,000 budgeted, and then it looks like last year we changed it to 2,500, and then we had 2,500 plugged in for this year. So is that not the right number? Should that be?
How much have we used so far? We don't have as of.
4,700.
4,700.
Okay.
Only 2,500 approved.
So
Right, I
looks
don't know
like
if you heard me,
we
but
increase it.
in 18 and 19, we had 17,000 budgeted for this line item.
Right.
And then last year we changed it to 2,500. I don't remember.
I don't know.
About that.
That was Pat. Pat does the budget. I don't even,
Yeah.
he doesn't ask me much.
So I
Do
don't
you know what we spent in the years we had 17,000? Do we know what we actually spent?
I don't have that with me.
Okay.
I'm sorry. And I don't think it's $17,000.
You think it's less than that, right?
Yes, I do.
Maybe we should just bump it up to 5.
Yeah, or, I mean,
You have,
what I'm hearing is we can take out the capital item for 600, whatever it was, that can fund our reserve. We have a fund balance in liquid fuels if we end up needing to do some paving. Whether Whether we want to budget, a little bit more in highway materials just in case, I don't think it's a big deal.
There's one other thing you can do. You can take the $25,000 from the general fund from line item 438, which is highway repair, I think, or highway. You could move that to the general, to liquid fuels. It's 430. It's under the general, it's under the Public Works budget.
Public Works, okay.
Yes. Okay, now you go down and isn't there something there? Oh, yeah, you got to keep going down where the smaller ones are. One more, I think.
Oh, highway
Not
438.
winter maintenance, street paving and repairs.
Oh, there it is.
$25,000 allocated. You
Oh.
can take that 25,000 and move it, and make that a zero and move the 25 to liquid fuels. You have plenty of liquid fuels money. And then anything that goes to highway materials that we normally put in the general fund, we'll just put it right in the liquid fuels. So you can take that 25,000 out of the general fund, make that zero. It'll help your
The operating budget.
being overspent.
That makes sense.
Everybody else okay with that?
Yeah, that sounds smart.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Any other good thoughts?
Zach, in capital, do you want to shift that
All right.
600 and designate it for the funding the reserve fund, I guess?
The 6 and the 75 too.
Yeah. So since it's just 1 year, okay. I'll mark that on here, and then Frank, I'll let you deal with that.
Okay.
All righty.
Probably not really capital, but you guys can figure that out.
Anything else? Going once, going twice. Okay, so we are all set with this. We'll move it to next week's Borough Council meeting.
Good. Okay.
Final round of public comment.
Yep. You want to turn on, stop sharing your screen maybe so we can see what hands are up
Okay, yeah.
for public comment. Okay. Anyone would like to make a comment? Just hover over participant and raise your hand the blue hand next to your name.
Gerald has his hand up, so I'll lower it. Gerald, you can unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Gerald. This is my first time participating. I just wanted to say hello to everybody. I'm new to town. I just moved in 2 weeks ago, and I just wanted to get, a little bit more involved and, get a good listen in and see how things were going around town. And thank you.
Welcome to our neighborhood.
Thank you very much. It's been very, very nice and warm and welcoming so far.
That's good to hear.
Good.
Yes.
Our next meeting is next Wednesday, Gerald. See you then,
And write it down. Same time?
same time.
Yes, same time.
We might have openings on some committees also.
Oh, great. I'm always looking to occupy my time.
Anybody else, Julie?
Do not see any other hands.
Okay.
All right, well, having no more hands raised, Erin, would you like to adjourn the meeting?
Absolutely. And thank you, Zach and Frank and everyone for tonight. Move to adjourn.
Bye all.
All right, good night, everybody.
Yeah, everyone.
Good night.
Nice meeting you all.
All right,
Thanks.
take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.